There are stories that float on the wind, whispered among the trees, carried by the spirits of the land. Today we share one of these stories, a tale of vengeance, courage, and fate. This is the legend of the Elephant King's revenge. But wait, before we continue, please subscribe to this channel for more stories. Now let's go. Long ago, in the heart of Kenya, there was a small, vibrant village nestled between vast plains and dense forests. The people there lived a simple but fulfilling life. They depended on the land, cultivating crops and tending livestock, singing songs to celebrate harvests and passing down wisdom from one generation to the next. The balance they shared with nature was sacred, and life moved according to the seasons, each year bringing the promise of prosperity and growth. Yet, one fateful year, everything changed when the wrath of a mighty Elephant King fell upon them. It began one evening just after sunset, when the sky turned a deep, fiery red and an unsettling stillness settled upon the village. The wind stopped blowing, and even the birds were silent. The villagers sensed something was wrong, and their fears were soon confirmed. The earth beneath them began to tremble, the vibrations growing stronger and stronger. In the distance, they saw it, an enormous silhouette moving toward them, slowly but deliberately. It was the Elephant King. His massive tusks glinted in the fading light, and his eyes were filled with a fiery rage that seemed to burn with an ancient sorrow. The Elephant King moved through the village's fields, his massive feet crushing everything in his path. The villagers watched helplessly as he trampled over their hard work, their crops, their hopes, and their dreams, all destroyed in an instant. The air filled with the sound of snapping branches, the crushing of corn stalks, and the cries of frightened people running for safety. Some tried to chase the beast away with torches, shouting and waving their arms, but the elephant was unstoppable. His rage was as deep as the roots of the forest, and no human effort could divert his destructive path. What was once a lush and thriving field was soon reduced to nothing but flattened soil, broken dreams scattered like the crushed plants. The Elephant King's wrath had left nothing behind but devastation and despair. With the passing of the Elephant King, the village was left in a state of shock. The once vibrant and bustling community, filled with laughter and hope, was now covered in the shadow of despair. The fields that once bore golden corn and lush cassava were now reduced to barren stretches of broken stalks and crushed soil. The rich green that had marked the prosperity of their land was replaced by a desolate brown, with the once fertile earth trampled beyond recognition. The village had depended on these fields for survival, and with their destruction, hunger became an inevitable future. The children who once played and ran through the fields with joyful shouts now cried from hunger, their innocent faces marked by worry and sadness that no child should bear. The elders gathered to discuss the situation, their wrinkled faces etched with fear and uncertainty. They spoke of old tales, of spirits and ancient forces that could not be understood by mere mortals. Some believed that the Elephant King was a spirit of vengeance, angered by the actions of humans. Others thought that it was simply a wild beast, roaming beyond its territory in search of something lost or stolen. But no one knew for certain. Fear spread through the village like a dark cloud, heavy and suffocating. Each night, families gathered together in their small huts, their conversations filled with whispers of dread, each fearing the day when the elephant might return to finish what he had started. The men of the village, who were usually full of vigor and ready to protect their community, were now at a loss. They had seen the size and power of the Elephant King, and they knew that no amount of manpower or weaponry could stand against such a force. Some suggested leaving the village and finding a new home, but the thought of abandoning the land of their ancestors, the place where they were born and raised, filled their hearts with grief. They were stuck, trapped between the love for their land and the terror of the Elephant King. The village was not just a place, it was their identity, their heritage, and leaving it behind was not an easy choice to make. Despite the gloom, there remained a flicker of hope. The elders spoke of ancient remedies, of ways to appease the spirits. They spoke of offerings that could be made, of rituals that could be performed to seek forgiveness from the forest. But even these ideas seemed distant, like grasping at straws in the face of the mighty force that was the Elephant King. The uncertainty and the fear of the unknown made every day longer and each night darker. And yet, amidst all the fear, a single question lingered in every heart. Was there anyone who could save them? Was there anyone who could stand up to the wrath of the Elephant King and bring peace back to their beloved village? The ruin of the harvest was not just the destruction of food, it was the loss of life as the villagers knew it. The people of the village depended on their crops not only for sustenance, but also for their livelihood. The fields that stretched across the village were their lifeline, their source of food, trade, and prosperity. It was from these fields that they filled their granaries, traded with nearby villages, and ensured that their children would have enough to eat through the long dry season. The harvest was everything to them. It represented hope, security, and the promise of a future. And now it was gone. The day after the Elephant King's rampage, the villagers walked through what used to be their fields. The air was thick with the scent of crushed plants and trampled soil. Corn stalks that once stood tall and proud lay scattered, broken, and twisted. Cassava plants were uprooted, their tubers exposed to the sun, already wilting and drying out. The ground, which once held the promise of life, was now a field of desolation. Families moved silently through the debris, picking up what little they could salvage, but there was almost nothing left. The realization of the extent of their loss sank in slowly, with each family coming to grips with the fact that the food they had counted on was no more. The children, who had always been full of laughter, now moved quietly alongside their parents. Their small hands tried to help, but there was little that could be done. The devastation was too great. The younger ones did not fully understand the gravity of the situation, but they sensed the change in the air. They could see the worry etched on their parents' faces, the silent tears that were wiped away quickly, so as not to show weakness. They knew something was very wrong, even if they could not comprehend it all. The elders, those who had seen many seasons come and go, were deeply troubled. They gathered together, their faces drawn and their voices hushed. They spoke of past hardships and how they had overcome them, but this was different. The Elephant King's wrath was not just a natural disaster. It felt like a judgment, a consequence of something greater. The elders spoke of balance, of respect for the land and the spirits that lived within it. They feared that the destruction of the crops was a sign that the balance had been broken. They tried to find reasons, to understand why the Elephant King had attacked, but their questions had no answers. The ruin of the harvest was not just about the loss of food, it was about the loss of security, the loss of dreams, and the shattering of the trust the villagers had in the natural world around them. It was as if the ground they stood upon had shifted, leaving them unsure and afraid. They had always trusted in the earth to provide, in the seasons to change and bring new growth, but now that trust was broken. And as they looked out at the fields, they knew that unless something changed, the future held nothing but hunger and hardship. They needed a miracle, a sign that hope was not lost, that life could begin again even after such devastation. Fear is a powerful thing. It can spread like wildfire, taking root in the hearts of people, growing stronger with each passing day. In the village, fear had become a constant companion. It was in the way people moved, quieter, more cautiously, as if the ground beneath them might give way at any moment. It was in the way they spoke, in hushed tones, avoiding the mention of the Elephant King, as if saying his name might summon him back. The people were haunted by the memory of that terrible night, and fear had become a shadow that followed them everywhere. The elders spoke of the Elephant King in whispers, their voices filled with both awe and dread. Some believed that the elephant was no ordinary beast, but a spirit, a force of nature that could not be tamed or reasoned with. They spoke of ancient wrongs, of promises broken long ago, and of the anger of the forest that had taken shape in the form of the mighty elephant. They said that the forest had its own laws, its own justice, and that the wrath of the Elephant King was a punishment for something that had been forgotten by the people. These whispers, though quiet, carried a weight that was felt by all who heard them. They spoke of things beyond human understanding, and that made the fear even more real. The children, who had always been fearless, now clung to their parents, their eyes wide with worry. They had heard the stories, had seen the destruction, and they knew that something terrible had happened. They asked their parents questions, trying to understand why the elephant had come, why he had destroyed their fields, but the parents had no answers. They could only hold their children close and promise that they would be safe, even though they themselves were not sure if they could keep that promise. The men of the village, the warriors who had always stood ready to protect their people, were at a loss. They had faced many challenges before, droughts, floods, wild animals, but nothing like this. The Elephant King was no ordinary threat. He was massive, powerful and filled with an anger that seemed almost otherworldly. They knew that no spear, no trap could stand against such a beast. The fear in their hearts was not just for themselves, but for their families, for their village, for the way of life that was slipping away from them. Fear had taken hold of the village, and it seemed as though it would never let go. Each day, the people waited, wondering if the Elephant King would return. They listened for the sound of the earth trembling, for the distant bellow that would signal his approach. They lived in constant anticipation, their lives on hold, unable to move forward or make plans for the future. The terror of the Elephant King had stolen not just their harvest, but their peace, their hope, and their sense of safety. And in the midst of all this fear, one question remained: how could they ever find a way to live without the shadow of the Elephant King hanging over them? In the midst of the village's despair, there was one young man who could not stand to see his people suffer any longer. His name was Njoroge, a warrior known for his strength, bravery, and most importantly, his love for his village. Unlike others who had grown paralyzed by fear, Njoroge felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. He had grown up in these fields, played under the shade of the old baobab trees, and had listened to stories told by the elders under the starlit sky. The village was his home, and seeing it fall into darkness and fear filled him with a resolve that could not be shaken. Njoroge understood the power of the Elephant King. He had seen the destruction with his own eyes. But where others saw a force too powerful to confront, Njoroge saw an opportunity to protect what he loved. He did not know what awaited him if he chose to face the Elephant King, but he knew that someone had to do something. The crops were gone, the people were scared, and the children cried from hunger. If nothing changed, the village would surely fall apart. He could not let that happen. He was determined to face whatever challenges came his way, even if it meant risking his own life. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Njoroge made his decision. He stood before the elders, his voice calm but filled with conviction. "I will face the Elephant King," he said. His words were met with gasps of shock and murmurs of concern. The elders who had known Njoroge since he was a child looked at him with a mixture of admiration and fear. They knew of his bravery, but they also knew the danger he was willing to face. They tried to dissuade him, telling him of the dangers of the power of the Elephant King, but Njoroge would not be moved. His heart was set. He would not sit idly by while his village suffered. Njoroge's mother, who had watched her son grow into a brave warrior, felt her heart tighten at his decision. She was proud of him, proud of his courage and his willingness to protect his people. But she was also scared. She knew that facing the Elephant King was no small feat, that it was perhaps a journey from which he might never return. But she also knew that Njoroge was driven by love, and that love was what made him truly brave. With tears in her eyes, she hugged her son tightly, whispering words of blessing and protection. She prayed that the spirits of their ancestors would watch over him, guide his steps, and bring him back safely. That night, as the village gathered around, Njoroge stood tall. He wore his warrior's attire, his spear in hand, ready to set out on his journey. The villagers watched in silence, their eyes filled with hope and fear. Some believed he was their last hope, while others feared he was walking into certain death. But Njoroge did not waver. He looked at the faces of his people, his family, his friends, the children who looked up to him, and he knew that he was doing the right thing. He took a deep breath, and with a final nod to his mother and the elders, he set off into the darkness, towards the heart of the forest where the Elephant King awaited. Njoroge's departure from the village was filled with emotions that words could barely capture. As he prepared to leave, his mother, Nyambura, stood by his side, her heart heavy, yet filled with an overwhelming sense of pride. She had always known that her son was different, courageous, selfless, and wise beyond his years. He had always cared deeply for the people around him, and now he was about to prove that care through his actions. She watched him gather his belongings, his spear, and a small pouch of provisions. Though she feared for his safety, she knew she had to be strong for him. She knew that the journey ahead would require more than just strength. It would need courage of the heart, and that was something Njoroge had in abundance. When the time came for him to leave, Nyambura embraced her son tightly. Her hands, calloused from years of work, held him close, as if trying to shield him from the dangers that lay ahead. She whispered her blessings into his ear, her voice trembling slightly. "My son, may the spirits of our ancestors walk with you. May they guide your steps, protect you from harm, and bring you back to us safely." She placed her hand on his forehead, closing her eyes as she whispered a prayer. She prayed not only for his protection, but also for his wisdom, that he might find a way to bring peace, not through violence, but through understanding. She knew that this journey was not just about strength, it was about something far deeper. Njoroge's younger siblings, too young to fully understand the gravity of the situation, stood nearby, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and confusion. To them, their brother was a hero, someone who could do anything. They tugged at his cloak, asking him if he would bring back stories of the forest, if he would bring back something magical. Njoroge knelt down, smiling at them, his heart heavy but his resolve unbroken. "I will come back, and I will bring peace with me," he said softly, ruffling their hair. He knew that the forest was a place of mystery, a place that held secrets beyond imagination, and he hoped that he would indeed return to share those secrets with them. As Njoroge finally turned to leave, his mother held back her tears, watching him walk away into the night. The path ahead was dark, the forest looming in the distance like a shadow against the starlit sky. The villagers stood in silence, their hearts heavy but filled with hope. They watched until Njoroge's figure disappeared from sight, swallowed by the darkness of the night and the thickness of the forest. And then, in the stillness, Nyambura knelt down, her eyes closed, her hands clasped tightly. She prayed with all her heart, asking the spirits to guide her son, to give him the strength and wisdom he needed to face the challenges ahead. She knew that this was a journey he had to make, a journey that could change everything. For him, for the village, and for the mighty Elephant King. Njoroge's journey into the forest was unlike anything he had experienced before. The forest was vast and ancient, filled with trees that towered over him, their branches intertwining to form a thick canopy that blocked out the sky. As he stepped deeper into the woods, he was greeted by the scent of damp earth, the sound of rustling leaves, and the occasional distant call of an unseen animal. The path ahead was uncertain, the forest both welcoming and intimidating, a place that seemed to breathe with life. Njoroge had heard many stories about the forest, tales of spirits, strange creatures, and of powerful forces that resided deep within its heart. Now, he was walking into those very stories, unsure of what he would find, but driven by a purpose that kept his fear at bay. The forest was alive, filled with a sense of magic that Njoroge could almost feel in the air around him. Every step he took seemed to lead him deeper into a world that was different from the one he knew. The trees seemed to whisper, their branches swaying as if they were communicating with each other, sharing secrets that no human could understand. The undergrowth was thick, with roots that twisted and turned, creating natural obstacles that Njoroge had to carefully navigate. He moved slowly, cautiously, his spear at his side, but his heart open to the experience. He knew that the forest was not just a place, it was a living being, filled with power and mystery. As Njoroge walked, he began to notice signs, small things that seemed almost too perfect to be coincidences. A feather, bright and colorful, lay in his path, as if placed there deliberately. A sudden gust of wind made the leaves rustle, and for a moment, Njoroge thought he heard a voice, a whisper, soft and distant, calling his name. He paused, looking around, his heart pounding. He had heard stories of the spirits of the forest, spirits that guided those who were lost, who protected those who were pure of heart. He wondered if these spirits were watching him now, if they were trying to communicate with him. He felt a strange sense of calm wash over him, as if the forest itself was welcoming him, guiding him toward something he could not yet see. The deeper he went, the more he felt the presence of the forest around him. It was as if he was not alone, as if unseen eyes were watching his every move. He felt a mixture of fear and awe. His senses heightened, every sound and every movement amplified in the quiet of the forest. The path was not easy. Thorns scratched at his skin, and the uneven ground made his journey slow and exhausting. But Njoroge pressed on, driven by the memory of his village, of his mother's blessing, and of the children who looked up to him. He knew that he could not turn back, that he had to keep moving forward, no matter what lay ahead. And so, Njoroge continued his journey, deeper into the heart of the Kenyan forest, toward the unknown. The forest seemed to grow darker, the air cooler, as if he was stepping into another world. He knew that somewhere ahead, the Elephant King awaited, a creature of immense power, a force of nature that had brought fear and despair to his village. But Njoroge did not allow fear to take hold. He knew that this journey was about more than facing the Elephant King. It was about understanding, about finding a way to bring peace, not just to his village, but to the forest, to the spirits, and to the mighty Elephant King himself. With each step, Njoroge drew closer to his destiny, the forest's mysteries unfolding around him, guiding him toward the path he was meant to take. As Njoroge ventured deeper into the forest, he found himself surrounded by a sea of green, an endless expanse of foliage that seemed to stretch on forever. The forest was dense, with trees standing tall like ancient guardians of a forgotten world. Their trunks were thick and gnarled, covered in moss and vines that twisted around them like the embrace of time itself. The canopy above was a rich tapestry of green, woven together in such a way that only small patches of sunlight managed to filter through, casting a soft, dappled glow on the forest floor. The air was cool and damp, filled with the scent of earth and leaves, a fragrance that spoke of life and growth, of things both old and new. Njoroge felt as though he had stepped into another realm, one that existed beyond the boundaries of the village, beyond the reach of human understanding. Everything in the forest seemed alive, connected in a way that was almost mystical. The leaves rustled softly as the wind moved through them, and the ground beneath his feet seemed to pulse with life, as if the forest itself had a heartbeat. Birds called out from hidden perches, their songs echoing through the trees like messages from unseen spirits. Occasionally, Njoroge would catch a glimpse of small animals darting between the underbrush, their movements swift and silent, as if they were watching him, curious but wary of his presence. The deeper Njoroge went, the more he began to notice the subtle signs of the forest's mysteries. Strange markings on tree trunks, symbols etched into the bark that seemed almost deliberate, as if left there by someone or something long ago. He came across small clearings where wildflowers grew in perfect circles, their petals bright and vivid against the backdrop of green. He found stones arranged in curious patterns, forming shapes that seemed too precise to be the work of nature alone. It was as if the forest was filled with clues, pieces of a puzzle that Njoroge did not yet understand. He felt a strange sense of connection to this place, as if it was trying to communicate with him, to show him something important. As he continued his journey, Njoroge began to feel a sense of reverence for the forest. It was not just a collection of trees and plants. It was a living entity, a place filled with wisdom and power. He remembered the stories the elders had told him when he was a child, stories of spirits that lived in the trees, of ancestors who watched over the forest, of the balance that had to be maintained between humans and nature. He realized now that those stories were not just tales meant to entertain. They were truths that spoke of the deep connection between all living things. The forest was a sacred place, and Njoroge felt honored to be walking through it, to be experiencing its mysteries firsthand. But there was also a sense of unease that lingered at the edges of his mind. The forest was beautiful, but it was also wild and unpredictable. He knew that it held both wonders and dangers, that its mysteries could be both enchanting and terrifying. He was acutely aware that he was a visitor here, an outsider in a world that was not his own. He moved with caution, his senses heightened, every rustle of leaves and every snap of a twig putting him on alert. He knew that somewhere in this vast sea of green, the Elephant King was waiting, a creature of immense power, a force that had brought devastation to his village. And yet, despite the fear that lingered, Njoroge felt a strange sense of peace. He knew that he was meant to be here, that this journey was part of his destiny. And so he pressed on, deeper into the heart of the forest, the mysteries of the green world unfolding around him, guiding him toward the path he was meant to take. As Njoroge made his way through the forest, he began to notice signs, subtle hints that seemed to speak to him in ways beyond the ordinary. These were not just signs of the natural world, like broken branches or animal tracks, but something deeper, something that felt almost spiritual. He had grown up hearing tales of the ancestors, the spirits who watched over the village and the land, and now, in the depths of the forest, it felt as though those very spirits were with him, guiding his every step. There was a sense of presence around him, an energy that made the air feel alive, charged with something beyond the physical. The first sign came in the form of a dream. As Njoroge rested one night under the shelter of a great tree, he fell into a deep sleep, and in that sleep he dreamt. He saw figures, shadowy, indistinct, moving through the forest. They were dressed in the garb of the old times, their faces painted with symbols of protection and power. They moved silently, their steps as light as the wind, their eyes watching him. One of the figures stepped forward, and though Njoroge could not see his face clearly, he felt a deep sense of familiarity, as if he knew this spirit, as if it was an ancestor reaching out to him across the vast expanse of time. The figure raised a hand, pointing deeper into the forest, as if showing Njoroge the way. When he awoke, the dream lingered in his mind, vivid and clear, a message that seemed to come from a place beyond his understanding. As he continued his journey, Njoroge began to see other signs, small but significant. He came across a tree whose bark was marked with ancient symbols, symbols that he recognized from the stories the elders used to tell. They were symbols of protection, of guidance, marks that were said to be left by the ancestors to show the way. He traced the symbols with his fingers, feeling a strange warmth, a sense of reassurance that he was on the right path. It was as if the forest itself was alive with the spirit of those who had come before, those who had walked these same paths, who had known the land and its secrets. There were moments when Njoroge felt an almost physical presence, as if someone was walking beside him, unseen but undeniably there. He would turn, expecting to see a figure, but there was only the forest, the trees swaying gently in the breeze. Yet the feeling remained, a comforting sense that he was not alone, that the spirits of his ancestors were with him, watching over him, guiding him toward his destiny. He found feathers, perfectly placed in his path, their colors bright against the green of the forest floor. He found stones arranged in circles, patterns that seemed deliberate, as if left there as a message, a sign that he was on the right track. Njoroge knew that the forest was a place of mystery, a place where the boundaries between the physical world and the spiritual world were blurred. He had always believed in the power of the ancestors, in the stories of the spirits that watched over them, but now, in the heart of the forest, he was experiencing that power firsthand. It gave him strength, a sense of purpose that pushed him forward, even in the face of the unknown. He knew that he was not just walking through the forest. He was walking in the footsteps of those who had come before, guided by their wisdom, their strength, and their love for the land. It was a humbling realization, and it filled Njoroge with a deep sense of respect, not only for the forest, but for the journey he was on. A journey that was about more than just facing the Elephant King. It was about understanding, about connection, about the bond between the past and the present. The first time Njoroge laid eyes on the Elephant King, it was as if time itself stood still. He had been moving cautiously through the forest, his senses heightened, his heart pounding with both fear and anticipation. He had heard the stories of the Elephant King's immense size, of his power, but nothing could have truly prepared him for the sight that lay before him. There, in a clearing bathed in the soft glow of the afternoon sun, stood the Elephant King, massive, majestic, and terrifying all at once. His presence seemed to fill the entire clearing, his dark eyes glowing with an intelligence that spoke of something ancient, something beyond the understanding of mere mortals. For a moment, neither Njoroge nor the elephant moved. It was as if they were both frozen in place, each one taking in the other. Njoroge could feel his heart pounding in his chest, his breath caught in his throat. The Elephant King was enormous, his tusks long and curved, their ivory gleaming in the sunlight. His skin was thick and wrinkled, a deep gray that seemed almost like stone, and his ears flapped gently as he regarded Njoroge with eyes that seemed to see right through him. In those eyes, Njoroge saw something he had not expected. Anger, yes, but also pain, a deep sorrow that seemed to weigh down the great beast. Slowly, Njoroge raised his spear, not in threat, but in readiness. He knew that he was no match for the Elephant King in terms of strength. He had seen what the beast was capable of, the destruction he could bring, and he knew that one wrong move could mean his death. But there was something in the way the Elephant King looked at him, something that held Njoroge back from making any aggressive move. It was as if the beast was challenging him, but not in the way a predator challenges its prey. It was a challenge of spirit, of understanding, a test, perhaps, to see if Njoroge was truly ready for what lay ahead. The elephant let out a deep rumble, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself, echoing in Njoroge's chest. It was a sound of warning, of authority, but also of sorrow. Njoroge could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, a sense of urgency in the air. He realized that this encounter was not just a confrontation. It was a pivotal moment, a crossroads where he could either choose to fight or to seek understanding. And in that moment, he chose the latter. With his spear still raised, he took a deep breath and spoke, his voice steady but filled with empathy. "Great Elephant King, I come not to harm you, but to understand. I seek a way to bring peace back to my village." For a brief moment there was silence. The Elephant King tilted his head slightly, as if considering Njoroge's words. In that gaze, Njoroge saw not just an animal but a being that carried the weight of generations, of pain and anger that had festered over time. He felt a deep sorrow welling up within him for the creature that had once been a symbol of strength and power,